Hey there, kiddos. I missed you today. I hope that it went well. I'm sorry that this video is so late getting up. I had some issues last night trying to get the video started, but here it is. Better late than never. You should have plenty of time to get it done tonight. So we're going to still be talking about multi-step equations today, but the multi-step equations that we do today are all going to involve the distributive property, so they will have parentheses in them. So, for example, here's our first example. It's 2 times the quantity 4 plus 3x equals negative 4. You see it has parentheses, which means we'll have to do distributive property. Our first step will always be to get rid of parentheses. Second step will be to combine like terms. And then your third step will always be to solve the equation. So let's solve this one. There is a place here for you to model with the algebra tiles. We are not going to model this one with algebra tiles. Modeling with the distributive property is unnecessary and it's kind of messy. So, it's not one that shows up very often. So if we need to, we'll come back to it, but for now we're gonna not do the model. We're just gonna solve. So our equation is this. And so we're going to start solving this equation by, first of all, getting rid of the parentheses. And we're going to do that with the distributive property. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 3x is 6x equals negative 4. Now I want to get the x by itself, so I'm going to start over here on the left side and I'm going to start canceling things out. To cancel out a positive 8, I have to do a negative 8. And so I do the same thing on the other side, which leaves me with 6x equals, since this is a negative 4 and this is a negative 8, my answer will be negative, and I just add them together, so it's negative 12. And then I divide both sides by 6 because that's the opposite of multiplying by 6. And so I get x equals negative 2. It's negative because I divided a negative by a positive, basic integer rule. So the answer is negative 2. You can go back and check this really easy by plugging negative 2 back into your original equation and making sure that your left side equals the right side. It's a real quick, easy way. It's hard to get an equation wrong when you can plug back in and check your answer. So if you're ever unsure, go back and check your answer. Just make sure. Double check. There are multiple ways to do that, but for now, we're just going to do it by plugging the number back in and checking. Couple more examples. I want you to try number 2 on your own. It will be one that we talk about in class. Somebody please raise your hand and remind me. I'll try to remember to make that your warm-up tomorrow. Number 3 we are going to do together because number 3 is the one that's a little bit tricky. If you notice, the thing in front of your parentheses for this problem is just a minus sign. There is no number. If you'll remember, that means that there's a 1 here. So I'm going to have to distribute the negative 1. Now the 7 equals 4x part, I haven't done anything with it yet, so I'm not going to. I'm just going to bring it down so that it can be part of my equation after I simplify. Then I'm going to distribute negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, and negative 1 times x is negative 1x. So I've gotten rid of parentheses, step 1. Step 2, are there like terms? Yes, there are. You have a 4x minus 1x. And if I put those together, that gives me 3x minus 2. Let me let you know that you do not necessarily have to combine like terms. You could still solve this equation without doing 4x minus 1x, but it's going to take you more steps and leaves you more room for error and more room to make mistakes. You should always simplify as far as you can. It makes your equation easier, and it will make it way easier to keep yourself from making mistakes. So when I get the x by itself, to do that I'm going to start by canceling out this minus 2 by adding 2 to both sides of the equal sign. So I get 9 equals 3x. And then I will divide both sides by 3. So I get that 3 equals x. So there is my answer. Again, you can check really quick by substituting 3 back into your original equation and making sure the right side equals the left side. Quick, easy way to make sure you got it correct. Again, I'm going to have you do number 4, and I'm going to do number 5. So make sure you write down number 4 and try it. I'll throw it up at the beginning of class tomorrow so we can talk about it. But number 5, it's a lot like the one that we just did. Okay, just we have to distribute and then we're going to have to combine like terms. So 4 equals, well, 2 times 3n is 6n, and 2 times 1 is 2 minus 6n. Well, I've gotten rid of parentheses. Now let's combine like terms. I have 6n minus 6n. Well, if you notice, if I do 6n minus 6n, what happens? It equals 0 because these cancel each other out. They made a 0 pair. So what you have left is 4 equals 2. Last time I checked, not sure about you, but the last time I checked, 4 does not equal 2. That is not a true statement. It doesn't make any sense. You are going to run across problems like this. Whenever this happens and your variables completely cancel and you're left with a statement that is not true, like 4 equals 2, then what you have is a problem that has no solution. And this will happen. There's not, I mean, sometimes your answer is just that there's not one, and so we say there is no solution. If you don't want to write out the words no solution, you can draw this little symbol. It means the same thing, okay? But one way or the other, you need to tell me, either with the symbol or by writing in words, there is no solution. That tells me that there is no value for n that I can plug in that will make this equation work. It doesn't work. It's a whole bunch of random numbers tossed together, and it doesn't work, which will happen occasionally. So let's do another one. Number 6. Number 6 doesn't have parentheses. So it doesn't look like a multi-step equation with the distributive property, but it is, and I'm going to show you why. If you look at that problem, at least when I look at that problem, I see something that looks a whole lot like a proportion. It does. It looks to me a whole lot like a proportion. And you learned proportions way back when. 6th grade, 7th grade, maybe 8th grade, but you have seen proportions before. And if you remember from when you learned proportions, to solve a proportion, you just cross multiply. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to cross multiply to simplify this equation so that we can begin to solve it. Let me clarify one other thing. You will notice on the right hand side you have a negative 1/2. Whenever you have a negative fraction, the negative only gets used one time. You either use it with the numerator or you use it with the denominator, but you do not use it with both of them, because that number is only negative once. It's negative 1/2, and so I usually use the negative with the numerator because that's how I say it, negative 1/2, but you don't have to. In this case, I'm going to. So to start this, I'm going to do 3 times negative 1, which is negative 3. Then I've got to cross multiply this way. I've already used the negative. I cannot worry about it anymore, but I have to do 2 times all of this, which is where the distributive property comes in, because now I have a problem with distributive property. The parentheses weren't there originally, but you do have to do 2 times everything, so I went ahead and put it in parentheses, so we're going to start that way. 2 times negative 4n is negative 8n, and 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Now I have an equation that I can solve. So I can begin to work my way through this by adding 2 to both sides. So now I end up with negative 1 equals negative 8n. And if I want the n by itself, I've got to divide by negative 8. And since I have a negative numerator and a negative denominator, they cancel each other out and make a positive, so I end up with 1 over 8 equals n. You can stop there. 1/8 equals n. It means n is a fraction. N is going to be part of a number, not a whole number. So 1/8 equals n. If you want to go a step further and divide 1 by 8 and get 0.125 and use that decimal, that's okay too, because they are equivalent. However, my suggestion to you would be to stop and leave it as 1/8. You're going to want the fraction when we start talking about something called slope and rate of change. The fraction is going to make way more sense than the decimal. So you want to sort of get used to leaving them as a fraction. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with 1/8. There's also nothing wrong with 0.125. The only time I would suggest you not turn a fraction into its decimal equivalent is if the decimal is a repeating decimal, because repeating decimals don't do anything for you. You can't operate with it. You can't add, subtract, multiply, or divide with it. You can't plug it in and get an answer, because if you do, it's going to be incorrect. You'll have to round because it repeats. You can't really do anything with it. It gives you no information. The fraction is much more valuable and much more accurate. So 1/8 is fine. Now, number 7, I'd like you to go ahead and try it as well. It will be one we go over tomorrow in class whenever you get there. So go ahead and copy it down and try it and see if you can do it. We'll check your answers tomorrow. So let's move on to some word problems. You have the perimeter of an equilateral triangle is 63 inches. So the first thing you're going to do is draw a triangle, and it needs to be equilateral, so all the sides should be the same. If the length of each side is 4x minus 3, you're asked to find the value of x. Whoops, that's an ugly 4. You guys all know that to find perimeter of anything, and this is a perimeter problem because that's how it starts right here is perimeter, we're just going to add all the sides. So I'm going to do 4 plus 4 plus 4, which is 12x. And then negative 3 plus negative 3 plus negative 3 is negative 9. And it tells me over here that the perimeter is 63. So there is my equation. I'm going to solve this like I solved all the other ones. I'm going to get x by itself. I'm going to start by adding 9 because that's the opposite. So I have 12x equals 72. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 12 so that I can get x by itself. So x equals 6. So x is 6. Now the next thing it asks us to do is find the length of a side. Well, to find the length of a side, I have to substitute 6 in for x. So I have to do 4 times 6 minus 3. Well, that's 24 minus 3, which gives me 21. And since we're talking about the length of a side, I have to say it's 21 inches because those are my units I was given in the problem. Make sure if you're doing a problem that involves units that you write down your units. I will come back to this one if we have time. If not, we'll talk about it tomorrow. But it's the same kind of problem. It's a rectangle perimeter problem. I want to get to the supplementary angle problem. And then I think there's another one after this. Yes, if I have time. So angle A and angle B are supplementary. That tells me that they're going to be 180 degrees. If I were you, I would draw this picture in my notes because those are your two supplementary angles. Angle A is 4 times 4x plus 5. And angle B is 2 times x plus 8. They ask you to find the measure of the largest angle. Well, I know that this angle plus this angle equals 180, so I'm going to start with that. 4 times 4x plus 5 plus 2 times x plus 8 equals 180. Okay? So distributive property, I'm going to have to do it twice because I have two sets of parentheses. So I get 16x plus 20 plus 2x plus 16 equals 180. Now I have like terms I'm going to combine. I've got 16x plus 2x, which is 18x. And then I have 20 plus 16, which is 36, equals 180. Well, now I'm going to solve this just like I've solved all my other ones. And I'm going to subtract 36 from both sides so I can cancel it. Which is 144, so I have 18x equals 144. I'm going to divide both sides by 18. And I get that x equals 8. But that's not what they asked me for. They asked me to find the largest angle. Well, if you look at what you're given, this one is definitely going to be bigger than this one. So we're going to plug 8 into that. So we have 4 times 8 plus 5. And we're going to do that math. So I have 4 times 32 plus 5, which is 4 times 37, which equals 148 degrees. So the largest angle is going to be 148 degrees. Last one is a multiple choice question. They just ask which equation represents the second step of the solution process. So they give you step 1 is the original equation. It's 5 times the quantity of 6x plus 1 plus 4 equals negative 39. And they want to know what's the second step. Well, the first thing you would do to this is distributive property. So you would do 5 times 6x and get 30x. And you would do 5 times 1 and get 5. And so the second step of your solution process should look like this. And if you look at your answer choices, it's not this one because they forgot to distribute that way. It can't be that one. It still has parentheses. Looks like C. So that's what it looks like. That's multi-step equations with distributive property. Bring all your questions when you come to class tomorrow. We'll have time to answer them. I hope you have a good evening, and I will see you tomorrow.